The massive alien ship hung in orbit above Earth like a silver moon that had appeared from nowhere. Every telescope on the planet pointed upward. Every news channel showed the same image. Every government scrambled to understand what was happening. Ambassador Zeleth of the Varani Collective stood in the center of the United Nations Assembly Hall. His forearms folded across his chest in what humans would later learn was a gesture of peaceful greeting. His skin was pale blue, almost like ice, and his four eyes moved independently. Studying the nervous human faces around him, "We have watched your species for 9 of your Earth years," Zeleth said, through a translation device hanging around his neck. "You have shown enough development to join the galactic community. This is normally a time for celebration." Secretary General Maria Santos leaned forward in her chair. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You said normally. What makes our situation different?" Zeleth's four eyes all focused on her at once, and several people in the room felt a chill run down their spines. "The Krethian Empire has claimed this sector of space. They will come. They always come. And what happens when they arrive?" asked General Daniel Hayes, who stood near the back of the room in his military uniform. He was tall with broad shoulders and a face that had seen too many battles already. "They will demand tribute, resources, labor, complete submission to their authority." Zeleth paused, and something like sadness crossed his alien features. "If you refuse, they will destroy you." The room erupted in noise. Delegates shouted questions. Military advisors huddled together, whispering. Maria held up her hand for silence, and slowly the chaos settled. What kind of weapons do they have? What kind of defenses work against them? Zeleth made a sound that the translator rendered as a sigh. The Krethians possess plasma cannons that can melt through any known ship hull. Their shields can absorb energy weapons of any strength. Their fleet numbers over 2,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a city in seconds. Dr. Nathan Cross, Earth's leading physicist, stood up from his seat. He was a thin man with messy hair and glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. There must be someone who has fought them successfully. Someone who found a weakness. Polani tried 300 cycles ago. They were the most advanced species in their region. They built enormous energy cannons, ships with shields twice as powerful as the Krethians. Zeleth's voice dropped lower. The Krethians destroyed their entire civilization in less than one rotation of their homeworld. Billions died. The survivors became slaves. Silence filled the room. The weight of what they were hearing pressed down on everyone like a physical force. Commander Samuel Price, Daniel's second-in-command, was the first to speak. "How long do we have?" "Perhaps 2 of your Earth years. Perhaps less." The Krethians do not announce their arrival. They simply appear. After the meeting ended, a smaller group gathered in a secure room deep beneath the UN building. Maria, Daniel, Samuel, Nathan, and a handful of other key figures sat around a metal table covered with maps and data screens. 2 years, Maria said quietly. 2 years to build weapons that can match technology thousands of years ahead of ours. "We can't match them," Nathan said, pulling up holographic displays of the alien weapon systems that Zeleth had shared. "Look at this. Their plasma cannons operate at temperatures we can barely measure. Their shields bend energy itself. We're still arguing about how to send humans to Mars efficiently." Daniel stood and walked to the window that showed a view of the night sky. Somewhere out there, an enemy fleet was preparing to wipe out everything he had ever known. "Then we don't try to match them," he said slowly. "What do you mean?" Maria asked. Daniel turned back to the group. "When I was young, my grandfather told me stories about wars on Earth. Not the big ones with tanks and planes, but the older ones. He said the greatest victories often came from fighters who refused to play by the enemy's rules." Samuel nodded, understanding where his commander was going. "Guerrilla tactics. Improvised weapons. Using the environment itself as a weapon." "Exactly." Daniel walked back to the table and pulled up a map of the solar system. "The Krethians expect us to build plasma cannons and energy shields like everyone else. They expect us to meet them in open space with weapons they understand." Nathan leaned forward, his eyes suddenly bright with interest. "But we don't have to do that. No, we don't." Daniel zoomed the map in on the asteroid belt, that massive ring of rocks and debris floating between Mars and Jupiter. "What do you see here?" "Rocks," Maria said. "Millions of rocks." "I see ammunition." Daniel's voice was calm but intense. "The Krethians have shields that stop energy weapons. But what about physical objects? What about a chunk of iron the size of a building hitting their ship at 100,000 kilometers per hour? Nathan was already running calculations in his head. Kinetic energy. Mass times velocity squared. If we could accelerate an asteroid to even a fraction of light speed, the impact would be devastating. No shield could stop it because there's no energy signature to deflect. They would see the asteroids coming, Maria pointed out. They would dodge them. Not if we hide them among natural debris. Not if we attack from every direction at once. Not if we make it impossible to tell which rocks are weapons and which are just rocks. Samuel pulled up new displays, showing the density of the asteroid belt. There are millions of objects out there. We could weaponize thousands of them, and the Krethians would never know which ones to target. The room fell quiet as everyone processed the idea. It was insane. It was desperate. It was completely unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Maria looked at Daniel with new respect in her eyes. "You're talking about turning our entire solar system into a trap. I'm talking about using what we have. We don't have plasma cannons or energy shields, but we have rocks. We have debris. We have engineers who can build anything if you give them enough time and motivation." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And we have 2 years." Nathan was already sketching designs on his datapad. "We would need mass drivers. Electromagnetic railguns scaled up to enormous sizes. Nuclear reactors for power. Guidance systems that can operate in complete radio silence." "Can you build them?" Maria asked. Nathan looked up, and for the first time since hearing about the Krethians, there was hope in his eyes. "Give me the resources, and I'll build you weapons that will make those alien conquerors wish they had never heard of Earth." Over the following weeks, the project took shape. They called it Project Slingshot, named after the ancient weapon that had allowed a shepherd boy to defeat a giant. Every major nation contributed resources. Factories that built cars began building railgun components. Universities became research centers for kinetic weapons. Millions of people worked in secret, united by a common purpose, and in the darkness of space, hidden among the asteroids. Humanity began building the most unusual weapons the galaxy had ever seen. Not from advanced technology or ancient alien knowledge, from rocks, metal, and the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. The Krethians were coming. But humanity would be ready to welcome them in a way they never expected. 18 months had passed since the aliens came with their warning. In that time, humanity had done something remarkable. They had stopped fighting each other and started fighting for their survival. Nathan. Cross floated in the observation deck of Station Artemis, watching through thick glass as robotic drones attached massive electromagnetic coils to an asteroid, the size of a football stadium. The station was built inside a hollowed asteroid, completely hidden from anyone looking from outside. It looked like just another space rock drifting in the belt. "That makes 53 this month," said Catherine Moore, his chief assistant, as she floated up beside him. She was a young woman with dark skin and bright eyes that never seemed to rest. "The crews are working themselves to exhaustion. They know what's at stake." Nathan turned to face her. "How are the targeting systems coming along?" "We've solved the guidance problem. Each projectile will have a tiny computer brain that can adjust its path using small thrusters. No radio signals, no energy output. Completely invisible until impact." Nathan nodded with satisfaction. The beauty of their weapon system was its simplicity. Energy weapons announced themselves with bright beams and massive power signatures. But a rock falling through space was invisible, silent, deadly, on another part of the station. Captain Samuel Price trained the first assault team. These were the pilots who would guide the asteroid weapons using nothing but small thruster packs and their own courage. They would hide among the debris, wait for the enemy to pass, and then activate the weapons. "The key is patience," Samuel told his team during a briefing session. They floated in a circular room, holding onto handles to keep themselves steady. The Krethians expect a fight. They expect ships with guns blazing. What they're going to get is silence, and then death from every direction. Lieutenant Gregory Walsh, a stocky man with a calm face that hid a sharp mind, raised his hand. What if they detect our heat signatures? A human body in space is warmer than the surrounding rocks. Good question. Samuel pulled up a hologram showing their specially designed suits. These suits have a cooling layer that brings your external temperature down to match the background radiation. To their sensors, you'll look like just another piece of ice. The team practiced for hours every day. They learned to move without creating visible thrust. They learned to communicate using tiny coded flashes of light instead of radio waves. They learned to survive in the cold darkness of space with minimal equipment. Back on Earth, General Daniel Hayes supervised the construction of the ground-based support systems. Massive dish antennas pointed toward the sky, ready to track enemy movements. Underground bunkers held command centers that could operate even if the surface was destroyed. And in secret facilities around the world, more railguns were being built. Smaller ones that could be hidden on moons and in the clouds of gas giants. Maria Santos visited one of these facilities in the mountains of Colorado. She walked through corridors carved into solid rock, past workers assembling guidance computers and engineers testing electromagnetic coils. "This is incredible," she said to Daniel, who walked beside her. 18 months ago, we were arguing about climate change and border disputes. Now we're building weapons to fight aliens. Nothing brings people together like a common enemy. Daniel stopped at a window overlooking the main assembly floor where a railgun barrel stretched for nearly a kilometer. "The question is whether we've done enough," a voice came from behind them. "You have done more than any species in recorded galactic history." They turned to find Pollux, the Sindari observer who had been assigned to watch Earth's preparations. Pollux was a small being, barely reaching Maria's waist, with large eyes and thin limbs that seemed too delicate for his body. His people had surrendered to the Krethians 3,000 years ago. "You've been watching our progress," Maria said. "What do you think of our chances?" Pollux was quiet for a long moment. His large eyes reflected the lights from the assembly floor below. "Among my people, there is no word for what you are doing. We have words for surrender, words for tribute, words for service. But we have no word for fighting back against impossible odds. We call it hope," Daniel said. "Hope." Pollux seemed to taste the word. "It is a strange concept. My ancestors felt it once long ago, before the Krethians came and taught us that resistance was meaningless." "And now?" Maria asked gently. Pollux looked up at her with those enormous eyes. "I watch your species build weapons from rocks, and I feel something I do not understand. Something that makes me think perhaps my ancestors were not foolish to fight. Perhaps they were simply alone." The preparation continued with growing speed. In the asteroid belt, over 100 mass drivers were now operational. Thousands of smaller kinetic impactors floated among the natural debris, waiting for activation. Mining ships worked around the clock, harvesting metal from asteroids to build more weapons. Nathan had also developed something special for the main engagement. He called it the hammer. "It's simple physics," he explained to the command staff during a presentation. "We found an asteroid made of almost pure iron, about 2 kilometers across. We've attached the largest mass driver ever built to one end. So when activated, it will accelerate the entire asteroid to nearly 1% the speed of light." 1% of light speed, Samuel repeated slowly. "The energy released on impact would be enough to crack a small moon." Nathan's voice was grim. "Can only use it once, and it takes 4 hours to charge. But if we can hit their command ship with this, we'll destroy the heart of their fleet in a single blow." Daniel studied the hologram of the hammer floating above the conference table, and they won't see it coming. It's an asteroid, just like millions of others in the belt. The mass driver is hidden inside, completely invisible from outside. To their sensors, it's just a rock. The final months of preparation flew by. Samuel's assault teams reached full readiness. Catherine completed the targeting network that would coordinate the attack. Gregory and his pilots memorized every rock and debris field in the engagement zone. On the day they received confirmation that the Krethian fleet had entered the solar system, Nathan stood alone in the observation deck of Station Artemis. He looked out at the asteroid belt, at the millions of rocks that had always been seen as obstacles and waste. Now they were weapons. Earth's first and last line of defense against an empire that had never been stopped. Catherine found him there an hour later. "The command staff is gathering. General Hayes wants you in the briefing room." "Okay." Nathan didn't move immediately. "When I was young, I dreamed about exploring space, meeting alien civilizations. I never imagined my greatest contribution to human history would be figuring out how to throw rocks really fast." Catherine smiled sadly. "Sometimes history needs explorers. Sometimes it needs warriors. Right now it needs someone who can turn debris into weapons. Let's go then." Nathan pushed off from the window and floated toward the door. "We have a fleet to destroy." Behind him, the asteroid belt waited in silence. Thousands of weapons hidden among millions of rocks. The greatest trap ever built. It was constructed by a species that had been throwing stones since before they learned to walk upright. The Crethians were about to learn why humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. Not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they never, ever gave up. And because they could make a weapon out of anything. The Crethian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Far beyond the orbit of Pluto, 300 warships hung in the darkness like a swarm of metal insects, their hulls gleaming with the blue-black alloy that had never been broken by any weapon in the galaxy. Fleet Commander Vraxis stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and surveyed the system that would soon belong to his empire. He was tall even by Crethian standards, with 4 arms and a face that seemed carved from stone. He had conquered 37 worlds in his career. This primitive backwater would be number 38, Porty commanded his censor officer. A younger Crethian named Korith studied the displays before him. Standard star system, 8 planets, 1 asteroid belt. The 3rd planet shows signs of civilization. Primitive radio signals, basic spacecraft in orbit around their world. Defenses, none detected, Commander. No energy weapons, no shield generators, no warships. Korith made a sound of amusement. They appear to have mining operations in the asteroid belt. Nothing else. Vraxis allowed himself a moment of contempt. Mining operations? They don't even know we're here. They're scratching at rocks while we prepare to burn their world. Should we send the standard tribute demand, Commander? Why waste time? Vraxis gestured dismissively with 2 of his arms. We'll destroy their orbital installations first. Show them our power, and we'll collect whatever's left worth taking. The fleet began moving inward, maintaining their standard attack formation. It was the same formation they had used for centuries, the same formation that had broken every defense they had ever encountered. The smaller attack ships spread out in a wide net, while the larger destroyers and the massive command ships moved in the protected center. They passed the outer planets without incident. The gas giants loomed enormous and silent, their moons spinning in endless orbits. Nothing moved. Nothing challenged them. Deep inside an asteroid in the belt, Daniel Hayes watched the enemy approach on a holographic display. The command center was cramped but efficient, every surface covered with screens and controls. Round him, his staff worked in tense silence, tracking the Crethian fleet's every movement. There in the channel, Samuel reported from his station. Right where we predicted. Standard formation. No sign they've detected anything unusual. SALT team, status report. Daniel called. Catherine listened to the responses coming through her earpiece. All teams ready. Gregory's group has visual on the lead ships. Nathan reports the hammer is fully charged. Daniel took a deep breath. They had planned for this moment for almost 2 years. They had built weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever seen. They'd trained their people to fight in ways that seemed insane by galactic standards. Now they would find out if any of it would work. All teams, Daniel said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. You are cleared to engage. Fire at will. In the darkness of the asteroid belt, the first mass driver activated. A chunk of iron, or the size of a school bus, accelerated from 0 to 40 kilometers per second in less than a second. It screamed silently through the vacuum, invisible against the black of space. aimed at the heart of the Crethian formation. Then another mass driver fired, and another, and another. Within minutes, hundreds of projectiles were streaking toward the enemy fleet. No energy signatures, no warning beams, it's just rocks moving faster than anything the Crethians had ever faced. The first impact caught Vrexus completely by surprise. His flagship shuddered violently, alarms screaming as something tore through the lower decks. The shields had not even flickered, because they were designed to deflect energy, not mass. The projectile had passed through the barrier like it wasn't there and punched a hole through 3 levels of the ship. What was that? Vrexus demanded, grabbing a support rail as the ship lurched. Unknown projectile commander. Koreth's voice was shaking as he studied his damaged sensors. Composition appears to be iron. Common iron or iron ore. Vrexus could not process what he was hearing. They attacked us with iron ore? The second wave hit before he could say anything else. All across the fleet, Crethian ships staggered as chunks of rock and metal slammed into them at impossible speeds. A destroyer to the left of the flagship broke in half, its plasma reactors detonating in a flash of blue fire. An attack cruiser on the right simply ceased to exist, reduced to fragments by 3 simultaneous impacts. Where is the enemy? Vrexus roared. I see no ships. I see no weapons. Where are they firing from? The asteroids, Commander. Koreth pulled up a tactical display that showed the belt around them. They've hidden weapons inside the asteroids themselves. We're surrounded by millions of rocks, and any one of them could be a weapon. Even as he spoke, more impacts shook the fleet. The Crethian ships fired their plasma cannons wildly, but there was nothing to hit. No ships to target. No installations to destroy. Just rocks falling through space. And any of them could be carrying death. Gregory Walsh floated in his assault pod, watching the chaos unfold through a tiny viewing port. His heart was racing, but his hands were steady on the controls. Around him, the other members of his team waited in their own pods, scattered among the debris like fish hiding in coral. Beautiful, he whispered, as another Crethian ship exploded. Absolutely beautiful. Cut the chatter. Samuel's voice came through his earpiece. Focus on your sector. We have more rocks to drop. Gregory smiled grimly and activated his next set of weapons. 3 more asteroids began accelerating toward the enemy fleet. He watched them disappear into the darkness, invisible even to him now, racing toward targets that had no idea death was coming. Vrexus ordered a retreat. It went against every instinct he had, against every tradition of Crethian warfare. But he was not a fool, and he could see that staying meant death. All ships, fall back. Maximum speed. Get us out of this belt. The fleet turned and began accelerating toward open space. But they were still in the kill zone, still surrounded by potential weapons. More impacts hammered them as they fled. A cruiser's engines were destroyed, leaving it spinning helplessly until a final projectile ended it. An attack ship tried to use its plasma cannons to clear a path. But you cannot shoot a rock that you cannot see coming. By the time the surviving ships cleared the asteroid belt, 47 vessels had been destroyed. Nearly a sixth of the fleet gone in less than an hour. And not a single human ship had been targeted because there were no human ships. Just rocks. Just debris. Just the weapons of a species that had learned long ago that you can kill with anything if you throw it hard enough. Vrexus stood on his damaged bridge and stared at the tactical display showing his losses. In 3 centuries of service, he had never experienced anything like this. He had never even heard of anything like this. Commander, Koreth said quietly, what do we do now? Vrexus did not answer immediately. He was thinking about the iron ore that had torn through his ship. Common, worthless iron ore. The kind of material that civilized species ignored? That was only useful for primitive construction. Somehow, the humans had turned it into a weapon that could kill Crethian warships. We fall back to the edge of the system, Vrexus finally said. We need to report this to the High Command. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Yes. His fleet limped toward safety. The asteroid belt behind them returned to silence. The mass drivers powered down. The assault teams retreated to their hidden bases. The rocks continued their endless orbits around the sun, keeping their secrets. In the command center, Daniel Hayes allowed himself a single moment of celebration. One battle won? But the war had only just begun. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Automated communication relays carried the impossible story from system to system. A primitive species had done what no one had done in 10,000 years. They had defeated a Krethian attack force. Not driven back. Not negotiated with. Defeated. With rocks, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session on Nexus Prime. The ancient station that served as neutral ground for all species. The station was enormous, a constructed world floating in empty space, home to millions of beings from hundreds of different civilizations. Its central chamber could hold 10,000 representatives. And today, every seat was filled. High Arbitrator Morvith called for order. Morvith was a being of crystalline structure, nearly transparent, who had served the Council for 6 centuries. His voice rang through the chamber like bells. This session is called to address the events in the Sol system. The human species has requested permission to address this assembly. Given recent events, I have granted their petition. A murmur ran through the chamber. Many species had never seen a human before. Most had assumed they would never need to, that the Krethians would handle the problem as they always did. Maria Santos walked to the speaker's platform at the center of the chamber. She felt very small, surrounded by beings 10 times her height, by representatives of species that had traveled between stars before humanity had discovered fire. But her voice was steady when she spoke. Thank you, High Arbitrator. I know many of you are surprised by what happened. Some of you probably think it was luck. Some of you probably think the Krethians will simply return with a larger fleet and finish us. She paused, letting her words settle. Translators hummed throughout the chamber, converting her speech into 1,000 different languages. You might be right. The Krethians have thousands of ships. We destroyed 47. In pure numbers, we should be terrified. Maria smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several delegates uncomfortable. But we're not. A holographic display activated behind her, showing the battle footage that every species in the galaxy had already seen. Krethian ships breaking apart, plasma cannons firing at empty space, an entire fleet in chaos. For millennia, this galaxy has operated on simple rules. The strong conquer the weak. Species with better weapons take what they want. Everyone accepts their place in the hierarchy. Maria gestured at the display. The Krethians have plasma cannons, so the Krethians rule. It seems logical. The display changed to show a simple asteroid floating against the stars. But here is what my species learned long before we knew other life existed. Weapons are tools, nothing more. And tools can be made from anything. Maria's voice grew stronger. Our ancestors survived ice ages by throwing rocks. They conquered continents with sharpened sticks. They split atoms with mathematics and determination. The display shifted again, showing the mass drivers hidden inside asteroids, the kinetic impactors floating among debris, the railguns built from salvaged parts. You see primitive technology, we see creativity. You see debris, we see ammunition. You see a species without proper weapons. Maria leaned forward, her eyes sweeping across the chamber. We see a species that has fought its way up from mud using whatever we could find. The Krethian representative rose from his seat. Fraxus had been given no choice but to attend this session to explain his failure to the galaxy. His voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You destroyed 47 ships through tricks, through hiding and ambush. This changes nothing. We will return with a larger fleet. We will burn your asteroids. We will reduce your world to ash. Maria nodded as if she had expected this response. You could try. But consider what that would cost. Every asteroid in our system is now a potential weapon. Every rock, every piece of ice, every grain of dust. To be safe, you would have to clear the entire system, piece by piece, while we hide and rebuild and wait. She paused, letting the implications sink in. My species has a saying, We can do this all day. We are patient. We are stubborn. And we are very, very good at making weapons out of nothing." The chamber fell into uneasy silence. Vraxis remained standing, his forearms rigid at his sides. Unable to form a response from the Polani delegation, a small voice spoke up. Ambassador Sharath, an insect-like being with compound eyes, rose on trembling legs. Her species had been destroyed by the Krethians 300 cycles ago. The survivors had served as slaves ever since. "The human speaks truth." Chirath's voice was soft but carried through the silent chamber. "My ancestors built great energy weapons to fight the Krethians. They failed. They built the same weapons the Krethians expected, and they died for it." She turned to face Vraxis directly, something no Polani had done in 3 centuries. "But the humans did not do this. They did not try to match your technology. They changed the rules of the contest itself, and you had no answer for it."
Another voice joined in.
Ambassador Pollux of the Sindari, who had watched humanity's preparations from the beginning. "My people surrendered 3,000 years ago because we believed resistance was impossible. The humans have shown us that we were wrong. Not because they are stronger than us, but because they think differently." More voices rose. The Morvathi, a species of peaceful traders, spoke about the implications for galactic commerce. The Vethani ancient scholars who recorded all knowledge requested copies of human tactical doctrine. Even species that had never suffered under Krethian rule expressed admiration for what humanity had accomplished. "High Arbitrator." Morvith raised a crystalline hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, he spoke directly to Maria. "The council has heard your words. We have seen the evidence. See, but I must ask a question that weighs on all our minds. What do you want from us?" Maria considered her response carefully. This moment, she knew, would shape the future of her entire species. "We want nothing from you except respect. We are not conquerors. We are not trying to build an empire." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from species old and young, powerful and weak. "What we offer is simple. Proof that the old rules can be broken. Proof that a species does not need ancient technology or superior weapons to defend itself. Proof that resistance is possible." She stepped back from the platform, her final words echoing through the chamber. "We made weapons from rocks, from debris, from things the galaxy considered worthless, and we used them to teach the Krethian something they had forgotten, that there is always another way to fight. Always another tool that can become a weapon. Always another species willing to stand up and say no." The chamber erupted into noise as hundreds of species talked over each other. Arguments broke out. Alliances shifted. Old certainties crumbled, and somewhere in the chaos, something new was being born. Something that would change the galaxy forever. Not because humanity had the best weapons or the most ships, but because they had shown everyone else that you did not need those things to fight. You just needed rocks. And the stubborn refusal to surrender. 1 year had passed since the battle in the asteroid belt. 1 year since humanity had done the impossible. And in that time, the galaxy had begun to change in ways no one had predicted. The Krethians did not return to Sol. Their internal councils argued endlessly about the human problem. But the admirals who had survived the battle counseled patience. The cost of conquering Earth had become too high. Not impossible, but expensive. And empires, even ancient ones, paid attention to costs. More importantly, other species were watching and learning. The first delegation to arrive on Earth came from the Polani. Ambassador Shirath herself led the group, traveling halfway across the galaxy to meet the species that had done what her ancestors could not. Daniel Hayes received them in the newly constructed Orbital Command Center, a facility that looked out over the Earth and the defensive installations that now protected it. "You wish to learn," Shirath said, her compound eyes reflecting the blue glow of Earth below. "Your methods, your philosophy, the way you think about warfare." Daniel studied her carefully. "Your people tried to fight the Krethians once. You built energy weapons, ships with powerful shields. All the things the galaxy said you needed. And we died. Chirath's voice was soft but steady. We followed the rules. We played the game the way everyone played it. And the Krethians were better at that game than we were. So why come to us now? What's different? Chirath moved to the window and looked out at the asteroid belt, visible as a faint band across the sky. You did not play their game. You invented a new game, one where the rules favored you instead of them. That is what we wish to understand.
Us.
Daniel nodded slowly. He had thought about this question many times since the battle. What had humanity done that was so different? They had not built better plasma cannons. They had not developed stronger shields. They had simply looked at what they had and asked what they could do with it. The key is not the weapons themselves, he said finally. The key is the willingness to see possibilities that others miss. Every species in the galaxy looked at the asteroid belt and saw obstacles. We looked at it and saw ammunition. That's not technology. That's perspective. Similar conversations happened across Earth and throughout human space. The Sindari sent engineers to study kinetic weapons. The Morvathi requested observers at human military academies. The Vethani, who recorded all knowledge, began compiling detailed histories of human warfare, fascinated by how many times humanity had survived by adapting and improvising. Maria. Santos found herself traveling constantly between Earth and Nexus Prime, building alliances that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. In her more quiet moments, she wondered if this was always humanity's role in the galaxy. Not to conquer, not to build the biggest empire, but to remind others that empires were not inevitable. 6 months after the first Polani delegation arrived, something unexpected happened. A Krethian ship entered the solar system, but it was not a warship. It was a small diplomatic vessel, approaching with shields down and weapons cold. The ship's sole occupant was a young Krethian named Vorith. By Krethian standards, he was barely an adult, only 2 centuries old. But there was something in his eyes that was different from the cold arrogance Daniel had seen in Varaxis. I am not here officially, Vorith explained during their first meeting. My government does not know I have come. They would probably execute me for treason if they found out. Then why risk it? Catherine asked. She had become the unofficial liaison for alien visitors. Her talent for communication proving as valuable as her engineering skills, Vorith was silent for a long moment, his 4 eyes studying the humans around him. Because I need to understand. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. All of them followed the same pattern. They built energy weapons to match ours. They developed shields like ours. They tried to fight us using our own methods, and they failed. He leaned forward, his voice intense. You were the first to do something different. You did not try to match us. You changed the nature of the conflict itself. Among my people, there is no concept for this. No word for it. Nathan Cross, who had joined the meeting out of scientific curiosity, spoke up. We call it lateral thinking. When you cannot win by the established rules, you change the rules. Lateral thinking. Vorith repeated the words carefully. This concept does not exist in our language. We have words for superior force, words for tactical advantage, words for overwhelming power, but we have no word for, he struggled to express it, for stepping sideways. Maybe that's the problem, Maria said gently. Maybe that's why you've never lost before. Not because you were unbeatable, but because no one ever tried to beat you in a way you didn't expect. Vorith stayed on Earth for 3 months. He observed. He questioned. He argued philosophy with Maria and tactical doctrine with Daniel. He watched humans train and build and plan, always looking for the thing that made them different. In the end, he found no single answer, no secret technology, no hidden advantage. Just a species that had spent its entire existence fighting for survival with whatever tools were available. A species that had never known what it was like to be the strongest, and so had learned to be the most adaptable instead. When Vorith left, carried something more valuable than any weapon. He carried a new way of seeing the universe. And though he never spoke of it publicly, the ideas he shared began to spread through the younger generation of Krethians. Doubt. Questions. The dangerous thought that Perhaps their ancestors had not built the only way to exist. The galaxy continued to change. The Cretheon Empire did not fall, but it stopped expanding. The tribute worlds began to negotiate, then to resist in small ways, then to trade as something closer to equals. Old alliances shifted. New powers emerged. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to do what it had always done: survive, adapt, and fight with whatever was at hand 10 years after first contact. High Arbitrator Morvith invited Maria Santos to give a final address to the Galactic Council before her retirement. She was older now, her hair fully gray, but her eyes were still sharp. "You asked me once what humanity wanted from the galaxy," she said, her voice echoing through the great chamber. "I told you we wanted respect, that we wanted to prove that resistance was possible." She paused, looking out at the thousands of delegates from hundreds of species. Many of them had changed because of humanity. Many of them had learned to see possibilities they had never imagined before. But now I understand something more. What we really gave the galaxy was not weapons or tactics or technology. What we gave you was permission. Permission to believe that the rules could be changed. Permission to think that the strong did not always have to crush the weak. Permission to look at a rock and see a weapon instead of just a rock. Maria smiled. And in that smile was all the stubborn hope that had carried humanity through ice ages and wars and plagues, and now into the stars. The galaxy gave us debris. We made weapons. That's not primitive. That's not desperate. That's human. And now, after 10 years, I hope you understand what that word really means. She stepped back from the platform to thunderous applause from species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive animals. The sound echoed through the chamber and out into the galaxy, carrying a simple message: never underestimate a species that can make a weapon out of anything, because that species will never stop fighting, never stop adapting, never stop finding new ways to win. And in the end, that is what makes humanity dangerous. Not our technology, not our numbers, but our absolute, unshakable refusal to accept that any battle is truly lost until every rock has been thrown, until every tool has been tried, until the very end.